With every year, the summers in the Northern Hemisphere are unleashing more and more heat upon us. This year could be catastrophic, from apocalyptic wildfires to deadly heat domes. Let's look into the reasons behind it and find out how bad the heat waves will get. Welcome to Dark New World. Across the globe, hot days are getting hotter and more frequent, while we're experiencing fewer cold days. Over the past decade, daily record high temperatures have occurred twice as often as record lows across the continental United States, up from a near 1-to-1 ratio in the 1950s. Heat waves are becoming more common, and intense heat waves are more frequent in the US West, although in some parts of the country the 1930s still holds the record for the number of heat waves. If greenhouse gas emissions are not significantly curtailed, daily high and low temperatures will increase by at least 5 degrees Fahrenheit in most areas by mid-century. The National Climate Assessment estimates 20 to 30 more days over 90 degrees Fahrenheit in most areas by mid-century. Heat waves are more dangerous when combined with high humidity. The combination of temperature and humidity is measured by the heat index. A recent study projects that the annual numbers of days with a heat index above 100 degrees Fahrenheit will double, and days with a heat index above 105 degrees Fahrenheit will triple nationwide when compared to the end of the 20th century. And with the extreme heat comes the danger of wildfires. Australia and California showed us that the fires are getting more intense and more frequent than before. And you're not imagining things. Wildfires are getting bigger and more destructive. One of the main forces driving this trend is climate change, which has intensified summertime droughts, reduced the mountaintop snowpack, making fire seasons longer, and even increased lightning strikes that can trigger big fires in tinder-dry forests. Since the 1980s, researchers say climate change has roughly doubled the area of wildfires in the western US. These trends are not about to change on their own. Global temperatures have been hotter than the historical average for more than 40 consecutive years, and 9 of the 10 warmest years on record have occurred since 2005. As the world heats up, some of the places already most vulnerable to extreme weather events are exposed further to weather extremes. Take California, the state most closely associated in the popular imagination with brutal wildfires. 15 out of the 20 biggest fires in the state's history have occurred since the year 2000, and under some data projections, big wildfires, covering more than 25,000 acres, could become 50% more frequent there by the year 2100. The US and Canada effectively suppress all but 2 to 3% of wildfire starts. However, this small percentage of fires burn at the height of each fire season, when dry conditions and extreme fire weather thwart even the most aggressive attempts to suppress them. Unintentionally, by focusing on short-term risks of wildfires, the US is predisposing forests to burn under the very worst conditions. Active fire suppression contributes to what is often referred to as the wildland fire paradox. The more we prevent fires in the short term, the worse wildfires become when they return. Researchers have determined that the extreme heat wave in the Pacific Northwest last year almost certainly would not have occurred without planetary warming caused by greenhouse gas emissions. Scientists have also found the fingerprints of climate change on bushfires in Australia and extreme heat and burning in Siberia. But hot weather and weak rainfall can also decrease the amount of vegetation that is available to feed fires. In other places, the decreased humidity can make vegetation more flammable, helping fires spread more easily. After taking all these factors into account, it's quite clear that we will see a significant increase in the global risk of extraordinary wildfires, even if nations manage to limit emissions of heat-trapping gases. In a moderate scenario for global warming, the likelihood of extreme, catastrophic fires could increase by up to a third by 2050, and up to 52% by 2100. If emissions are not curbed and the planet heats up more, wildfire risks could rise up to 57% by the end of the century. The increase in burning is projected to be especially large in places including the Arctic. The northern reaches of Russia and North America are already warming much more quickly than the rest of the globe. The intense Arctic fires of 2020 released more polluting gases into the atmosphere in June than any other month in 18 years of data collection. In March and April of 2022, India and Pakistan experienced the worst heat wave since 120 years. The weather was so extreme that the slums and megacities of the subcontinent turned into deadly hotboxes. Most of India's 1.3 billion inhabitants have access to air conditioning, but not all. The poorest of the poorest, living in small brick houses in slums, often with 10 family members in one room, have nothing but the outside to cool down. It got so hot that 65 people in India and 35 people in Pakistan are reported dead. Even birds suffered from heat strokes. It's a climate extreme that could, if the frequency of these events would further intensify, turn urban Indian megacities into concrete hell. India and Pakistan are no strangers to extreme temperatures, but the current heatwave stands out for its early season timing, its rapid onset, its extent, and its severity. Researchers are now investigating how much human-caused climate change contributed to the severe heat across South Asia. But scientists have long warned that more frequent and more extreme heat waves are some of the most direct consequences of rising global average temperatures. Climate change is already rendering parts of the world unlivable. And in South Asia, survival now depends on artificial cooling. That cooling demands power. Fans and air conditioners in India and Pakistan run on electricity from burning fossil fuels, which emit greenhouse gases that heat up the planet. About 75% of India's energy comes from coal, oil and natural gas, while Pakistan gets about 60% of its energy from the same mix. The ongoing heatwave has already increased demand for coal imports. Because of its immense scale, how South Asia cools off will shift international energy markets and shape the global climate. Sales of air conditioners have exploded worldwide over the last few years. The growth is not driven by high-income countries like the United States, where almost 90% of homes already have air conditioning. The growth is driven by middle-income countries where households are buying air conditioners at alarming rates. The prime example is China, where sales of air conditioners have nearly doubled over the last 5 years. In 2013 alone, there were 64 million units sold, more than 8 times as many as were sold in the United States. The scope for increased demand for air conditioning is staggering. Take India, for example. Compared with the United States, India has 4 times the population, but also more than 3 times as many cooling degree days per person. Thus, India's total potential demand for cooling is 12 times that of the United States. Air conditioning is still relatively uncommon in India and other low-income countries, but this is poised to change dramatically as incomes rise around the world. Air conditioning will bring relief to more than 3 billion people who live in the tropics and subtropics. However, meeting the increased demand for electricity will be an enormous challenge. Trillions of dollars of investments will be required in electricity generation and transmission infrastructure, and even the most robust markets will be threatened by shortages and price spikes. In addition, most electricity worldwide continues to be generated using fossil fuels, so this growth in air conditioning means billions of tons of increased carbon dioxide emissions. To minimize the impact that climate change has on us, we further accelerate the warming of our atmosphere. It's a vicious cycle that can only accelerate. The scary part is that this is just the beginning. Many third world countries are in the process of industrialization. Billions of people in the subtropics and tropics will have the need for air conditioning and demand it. Cities in southern latitudes will simply be uninhabitable at some point in the future. Slums and densely populated cities will turn into death traps for children and the elderly. This will further intensify the need for movement and accelerate the coming climate refugee crisis. Farmland could be destroyed by heat, lack of water and fire, and we cannot do anything about that, unfortunately. The time to act was 50 years ago. We can try to minimize the effects that we caused in the past, but it won't save all of us. And it won't save our forests, farmland, or all the species that we wiped out. Every video make is a puzzle piece of collapse. There are hundreds of little factors that will form the storm that will bring humanity to its limits and beyond. Maybe heat waves won't be the main factor of collapse. Yeah, sure, but it will have consequences that will make it easier for escalation in other areas. It will be the death of 1,000 cuts that will bring us to our knees. Now imagine you're living in extreme hot conditions and the water is running out. This is the reality millions of people face, for example in Iraq. In the video on the left, we talk about the coming water wars. Yes, that is a thing, and it's happening now. On the right, we talk about the death of insects, a mass extinction that's happening right now mostly unnoticed. If you want to see more collapse-related content, then please like and subscribe. My name is Dennis. Thank you for watching and goodbye.